This video is brought to you by Factor, the best delivery food service, bringing you the best and healthiest food on the market, all planned and packaged for you, made by the expertise of Factor's gourmet chefs to give you all the nutrition that you need throughout the day, and that's it. No need to go to the grocery store, no need to eat out, no need to order anywhere else. Factor has you covered not only with really tasty food, but it has everything you need to give you all the energy for your day. All you have to do is microwave it, unpeel, and enjoy. And they have a huge menu, plethora of different kind of meals for you, whether you want to go on a keto diet, if you want more protein, if you want to go vegan, whatever it is, Factor has you covered. And they also have great smoothies as well. The coconut flavor is my personal favorite. I always get these. It tastes so good. Sometimes I have to remind myself that it's healthy as well. Usually healthy food doesn't taste that good, but it's a different thing with Factor. It actually is enjoyable. And they're giving you guys a great deal by clicking the link in the description below or head to factor75.com/TheWeasle60. You can use that promo code TheWeasle60 to get 60% off your first order. I'm telling you guys, it's an amazing deal, very affordable, especially with this discount, and you definitely won't regret it. I highly recommend this for you guys. I highly recommend this for you if you're looking to get on a good diet. What's up, guys? Welcome back to MMA Meeting. Let's Talk with the Weasel podcast, where we talk all things MMA, and there's quite a bit going around right now. So we hear news about Francis Ngannou, we got stuff about Paulo Costa, Khamzat Chimaev came out and just put everybody on blast. And let's start with yesterday's card where Cory Sandhagen defeated Chito by a split decision somehow. He got a 50-45 and then a 49-46 for him. Another judge gave 48-47 for Chito, which is one of the worst scorecards ever in UFC history. There's no way you could even give Chito 2 rounds, let alone 3. At most, Chito won 1 round. At most. I don't even give him that. I thought it was 50-45 for Cory. I thought he won every single round. So that judge, something needs to happen. He needs to get questioned at least, fired, reprimanded, outcasted, put on an island somewhere. I don't even know. He needs to be kept away from this sport, because that was egregious. Like, which rounds did Chito win? What I think was going on in his head was he was looking at the facial damage on Cory, because Cory was getting cut up and stuff like that, but he was winning the fight. That was actually a clear example of why you can't go off of faces. You can't go off of cosmetic damage to determine who won a round. You can't do that. Because if you did that, you would give more rounds to Chito. Judging of what you're seeing in the fight, the strikes landing, the takedowns, all of that stuff, Cory was obviously winning the fight. Right in the first round, Chito landed one elbow off of his back, right? He was on the ground, back on the mat, and threw an elbow upward at Cory, and that alone cut him. That should not be enough to win a round. After getting hit by way more elbows, getting taken to the ground, beat on the feet in that round, there's no way you win a round because you cut him open with a slight elbow like that. Because to cut someone open with an elbow, you don't need that much force. You don't need to crack them hard with it. So I hope this is a clear example for a lot of people that used to throw a lot of arguments that, look at his face, of course he lost. This should be a clear example as to why that is not true. But overall, Cory had a good performance. He showed his evolution with his takedowns, didn't allow Chito to settle too much because he kept throwing punches at him, taking a little bit out of Merab Dvalishvili's book against a slow starter, and just keep throwing stuff at them. Overload the data, and they'll never be able to get out of first gear. Now, Cory didn't put on as much pressure or throw out nearly as much output as Merab did, but it was still enough because not only was he throwing strikes, he was also moving a lot. That's also another thing. It's not just throwing strikes and shooting takedowns, it's also moving all over the place that's going to overload the data because Chito's a sniper. He's trying to find that one big shot to knock you out. And if he can't find it because you keep moving all over the place, you keep throwing stuff in his face, you keep changing levels for takedowns, there's too many stuff for him to worry about and too many places for him to target for that knockout, he'll never be successful with it. And this is another big example of how to beat a slow starter. Petr Yan and Chito are both notorious slow starters, and they both have to fix this because there's no way they're going to beat the best fighters in this division right now fighting that way. They need to come out quicker. And Chito started to fight. He started to get going when there was like 20 seconds left of the 5th round. It was crazy to see him do nothing for so long, and then he kind of just went for broke. He should have started going for broke in the 3rd or 4th round. Not the end of the 5th, because even his coach was telling him, like, what are you waiting for? Get going. He finally started when it was way too late. And Cory's the kind of guy that's very hard to knock out, so you can't bank on the last few seconds of the fight to knock a durable guy like that out. He's also very tricky and all that stuff. Now, I see people making a lot of Chito's takedown defense. Chito's takedown defense seemed to only be bad in the beginning and in the middle of the fight. But when the 4th and 5th rounds came, he was defending most of the takedowns. What was actually happening here was Chito was accepting them. He was going for the guillotine. He trusted his guard game. And then when he learned not to do that, he was starting to defend them, right? He had a good sprawl, I think it was in the 4th round. Fought for the underhook and another takedown, but just really didn't do much on the feet. So not the most eventful fight, right? It wasn't the most entertaining. I saw some people saying that this is the card they watched with their friends that never watched the UFC before, and now they're not fans of it anymore. I mean, you can't predict this kind of stuff, right? Everybody thought that Chito and Cory was going to be chaos, like a lot of shots getting thrown from both guys, damage happening, but it didn't really go that way. One thing is for certain after watching that fight, though, is I don't think either of these guys beat Merab or Henry Cejudo because of the wrestling. Of course, because Chito's takedown defense is not good enough for those two, but even for Cory Sandhagen, did you see the way that Chito was catching his kicks and he could have taken it to the ground, but he just didn't have the right technique? If Henry or Merab catches Cory's kicks like that, he's going to the ground. And we've seen how Cory is on his back, right? He goes for a lot of submissions as well. Very similar to Chito, actually. We saw that in the TJ Dillashaw fight, and Henry and Merab would deal with that accordingly. And Cory's calling out Merab, and it makes a lot of sense because Merab is not going to get a title shot unless Henry beats Aljamain. Cory's making a smart move here. In the meantime, before the fight happens, before we see who the winner is of Henry versus Aljamain, he wants a shot at Merab. Take him out so he can get the next title shot before anybody else does. Very smart move, but very bad matchup for Cory. He could potentially land like a flying knee or something like that, but if that's not happening, I don't see how Cory wins the fight. And as for Chito, I think it's pretty obvious who he fights next, Petr Yan. I'm not going to lie though, the first 2 rounds are going to be a snooze fest. It's going to be a whole staring match for 2 rounds straight. I mean, it might even be for 5 rounds straight if they never find that opening on each other. But as soon as the fight gets going between them two, I think it would be fun. Either way, I think that's the fight to make next. The word is right now that Francis Ngannou's next fight is in the works, and he may be fighting Derek Chisora for Misfits Boxing. Chisora was the last guy that Tyson Fury beat. He is 39 years old, 6'2", experienced heavyweight boxer, fought some of the best today. I mean, he fought Joseph Parker twice, lost both of those fights, even though they were pretty close. He fought Usyk, he fought Dillian White, fought literally the best heavyweights in recent time. And for him to get Francis Ngannou is interesting. Now, I don't see Ngannou winning, but in the heavyweight division, anything can happen. He does have the power, he is younger, he is very athletic, he is long, tall, and bigger than Chisora, but there's just a massive difference in skill. More importantly than any of that is, why? Why is Ngannou fighting Chisora? Was this all worth it at the end of the day? Because I cannot imagine that Francis Ngannou is going to get paid more to fight Derek Chisora than he would have gotten to fight Jon Jones. Nobody cares about Ngannou versus Chisora, besides some MMA fans that want to just see how he does. And if he loses this fight, what's left for him? Does he get Deontay Wilder? I cannot imagine. I don't think Wilder would care to fight Ngannou if he loses to Chisora, or Tyson Fury if he loses to Chisora. All of his opportunities in boxing pretty much could potentially stop here if Ngannou loses this fight, and that's a high likelihood of happening. What's the point in this fight? Now, it isn't 100% confirmed, but it is in the works, so that might be the next fight. We're going to have to see here. In my opinion, definitely not the right move for Francis Ngannou. It may be true what everybody's saying, what Conor McGregor said, what Chael Sonnen said, other people around the scene. They said that Ngannou really doesn't know what he's doing, and he may have made the wrong move here. And now we talk about Paulo Costa. So Paulo Costa's manager, Tamara Elvis, said that Paulo Costa is now the most valued fighter from Brazil. He is the highest paid Brazilian UFC fighter. And he's going to be making $1 million, not Brazilian, $1 million American dollars per fight. I don't know if I buy that. There's no way Paulo Costa went from, what was he getting, like 70 and 70 or something, to getting paid $1 million per fight, getting paid more than Alex Pereira, the champion, getting paid more than Charles Oliveira, the biggest star from Brazil right now. There is no way Paulo Costa is getting paid more than the actual champion. I mean, if he did, good for him. I'm very curious how his manager pulled that off, but I don't believe that. And Tamara Elvis said that Paulo Costa's pay-per-view numbers against Israel Adesanya was the highest pay-per-view sale in the middleweight division, and that is why he's getting paid $1 million per fight. But didn't that draw like 800,000 or something? And Adesanya was actually the draw of that fight? I don't know, man. If he pulled this off, that's crazy. Good on him. I hope other fighters are able to get the same. I mean, Costa also did say that he was offered $500,000 a show and $150,000 to win when he was negotiating to fight Robert Whittaker, but he turned it down. I don't know what to believe about all that, because he'd be one of the highest paid fighters in all of the UFC if this is true. He is 1-2 in his last 3 fights. He barely beat Luke Rockhold. He missed weight before that when he went up against Marvin Vettori. I don't know how much I could believe all this. And Khamzat Chimaev comes out and says he accepted every single fight that came his way. And he said yes, he was offered Alex Pereira. He was offered Colby Covington. He was offered Robert Whittaker. And he accepted every single fight. Pretty much saying that someone denied it and would have to be his opponents. Because if the UFC is coming to him with those fights and he's accepting, that means both him and the UFC want the fight, and the only guy they're waiting on is his opponent. So he's practically saying that Pereira, Colby, and Whittaker all turned down their fights against Khamzat Chimaev. Somebody's lying here because they all said they accepted against him. Someone's not telling the truth. Maybe Alex Pereira said he wouldn't accept it at 185 and he'll only accept it at 205, so UFC scrapped that. I can't imagine Whittaker did something like that, or Colby. I mean, they would have to fight him at 170 or 185. And we do know now that Khamzat is moving up to 185, so potentially he told Colby, I'll fight you at 185 or something, considering that he did miss weight in his last fight pretty badly. There is something in the details here that had to have made these fights fall off. And now Khamzat's saying that Pereira is the easiest fight in the UFC for him. He said he doesn't even need to throw a punch at him. That could be potentially true, but Pereira is a big, strong guy. But Khamzat is the most dangerous matchup for Alex Pereira. So I could definitely see Khamzat defeating Pereira. I don't see him beating Whittaker, but also didn't Khamzat also say that he doesn't want to fight Whittaker, but now he's saying he accepted the fight? Something's not adding up here, because Whittaker is also the most dangerous matchup for Khamzat in the middleweight or welterweight division. And as for Colby Covington, that's a competitive fight that can go back and forth. Really depends on how Khamzat's cardio is. If it's good for 5 rounds, I see him beating Colby, but if it's not, if he starts to drown in the championship rounds, I could see Colby winning the fight. That's definitely the best fight out of those 3, whereas I think Whittaker shuts him down, and I think Khamzat could potentially shut Pereira down. And that's all interesting of how like styles make fights. Same thing with the whole Leon, Kamaru, and Colby thing, where everybody's pretty much come to an agreement that Colby is a tougher fight for Leon Edwards, given his style. Kamaru and Colby is always going to be competitive, and Leon beats Kamaru. Very interesting with that whole thing there, and it just shows, man, MMA math never works. It's such a flawed theory that still a lot of people today go to. And I can see how the UFC wants Colby Covington to be the champion, because he would be so marketable. They would potentially make the most money with him as champion right now, and the fact that he is a good fighter too. He will do his part in the promotion to sell the fights, whereas guys like Leon probably won't. Kamaru does somewhat. Colby, though, would go over the top. Like, he would put a lot of energy in selling his fights. But what do you guys think about this, though? What do you guys think about Leon saying that he's not going to accept it? But like a couple days before, he said that he's the champion and he'll fight anybody the UFC throws at him. I guess anybody if it's not Colby? Is that what he's really saying here? Is it just that he doesn't like Colby or he wants to go through meritocracy? But Colby will give him the most money. It's an interesting thing in that welterweight division right now, man. And it seems like Joe Rogan now is getting a lot of flack for what he was saying about Jorge and GSP. And the fact that Jorge came onto his podcast right after, it looks like he was just propping up Jorge, giving him some respect there. Or he just says something he probably doesn't believe anymore. When you have to talk so much because of your platform, you're going to say some stuff that doesn't make sense sometimes. And that's what it seemed from Joe Rogan, because I can't imagine anybody thinks that Jorge would ever beat GSP. GSP is a prime example of a fighter who defies the odds of an older generation being worse than the newer generation. Prime GSP could be champion today. That's how good he was. And when we talk about new generation fighters, we aren't talking about Jorge fighting GSP. We're talking about like Khabib versus GSP. Khabib versus GSP was the fight to make because nobody really knew how that would go down. That's giving respect to both guys, both Khabib and GSP, because of how great they were. And Israel Adesanya came out and he talked about learning from his loss to Alex Pereira. And he's at a state where he has nothing to lose. It's almost like the last resort of confidence. I have nothing to lose. I'm going to come out there and do what I can because the worst already happened. And he was telling himself that he knows how to beat him. He knows he can beat him, and he thinks that Pereira also knows that he can beat him. It doesn't seem like the best mental state to be in. It seems like that kind of mental state is worse than where Adesanya was before. But it could potentially show that he's going to be more dangerous, where he's going to come out there to try to hurt Pereira more, probably be a lot more aggressive in the fight, throw out more punches, trying to knock him out, whatever it is. But we've seen that happen before. We saw what happened when Adesanya came out there aggressive. He eventually got knocked out. He had success early, but he got knocked out early too. It is kind of sad when you see it from that perspective. You lose to the same guy 3 times. He chases you down in 2 different sports. You were very confident he couldn't beat you in this one, but he does it. He KOs you in the 5th round. You're now 0-3 against him. And now all you can think is, I got nothing else to lose. He's going to be more dangerous this time, but could also be more reckless. And I think Adesanya was also saying that he goes to therapy. I don't know if it's because of the loss or he's always been going to therapy, but it's tough, man. That is tough. And we're going to start with Kiartik. Since an older Edgar was able to make 135, how do you think he would have done if he went down to 135 after the second pen fight? Do you think he would have beaten Cruz at UFC 132? If so, how do you think he would have done against Faber, DJ, Barao, Macdonald, Wineland, TJ, and the rest? It's crazy to think that if Edgar went down, he could have become one of the most dominant champions with 7+ defenses. Okay, just to create context here for people that didn't watch Frankie Edgar back then, the second BJ Penn fight was way back around like 2010. I think it was before he fought Gray Maynard the second and third times, and that was before he lost to Benson Henderson. Then he moved down and fought Jose Aldo. And UFC 132 was when Cruz fought Faber for the second time. That's when Cruz established himself as the best bantamweight in the world, because there was a lot of people thinking that, Faber was the best because he beat Cruz before, but that fight showed Cruz is definitely the best guy. If Edgar, before he ever lost to Benson Henderson and got greatly damaged by Gray Maynard, if he went down to fight Dominick Cruz, would he have beaten him? I think he could have. Now, it's hard for me to say if he would or wouldn't definitively. They both have similar elements to their game. Big reliance on their cardio, a lot of activity and output, wrestle boxing style with good leg kicks. Frankie was definitely a lot tougher. He wouldn't have to worry at all about getting knocked out by Cruz. I mean, the guy was getting punched in the face by BJ Penn and Gray Maynard. But Cruz also didn't have the best chin. We did see Frankie later able to knock out Chad Mendes. And even though he's not a knockout artist, he definitely has that sort of power, especially if he moves down to 135. Maybe he's able to carry some of it with him. But most likely, it'd be a fight completely zoned in on who had the better technique rather than who was more athletic. And I can see Frankie's wrestling giving Cruz some issues. Most of Cruz's competition back then was smaller than him. Cruz most likely walks around like the high 150s, maybe 160, and Frankie walks around the same kind of weight, even though he was fighting at 155. But if you look at Dominick Cruz's competition back when he fought Uriah Faber at 2011, look at his competition, man. Demetrius Johnson was 5'3", a 125er. Scott Jorgensen, 5'5", 135er for most of his career, but also fought at 125. Joseph Benavidez, who was like 5'4", 125er. Brian Bowles was his size. Uriah Faber was around his size, even though he was a little bit smaller. Ian McCall, who was really a 125er. Most of Dominick Cruz's competition were natural 125ers, and he was able to use his wrestling as a way to overpower them. The only time you didn't see that was when he fought Uriah Faber. Faber was able to stuff a lot of the takedowns because he was more relatively to Cruz's weight. So because of that, you saw Faber defend a lot of the takedowns. He did get taken down a few times in the fight, but he defended most of the takedowns, even while being a very plodding fighter who has a lot of emphasis on just throwing the right overhand. And even though Uriah Faber has a notorious, nasty guillotine choke, Cruz didn't care. He shot him regardless. Could he do that against Frankie? Could he take Frankie down? I don't see it happening. Maybe once or twice. Frankie, I believe, had better takedown defense. He had better fundamental boxing. Unlike Uriah Faber, he has very good movement. Not going to be a sitting target for Dominick Cruz to throw jabs at and leg kicks the whole fight. And Frankie Edgar in his prime was one of the best fighters in the world ever to catch leg kicks and take you to the ground. And Dominick Cruz really telegraphs those leg kicks. I would actually lean to Frankie Edgar there. Now, would he have beaten Uriah Faber? Yes, I believe so. He actually did later. Would he have beaten Demetrius Johnson? Absolutely. He definitely would have beaten Michael Macdonald, Eddie Wineland. TJ and Barao are tough, because TJ has very good wrestling, better striking overall, better movement, not as durable and not as big. I could see him going back and forth, but I'd probably go to TJ in that fight, and I think prime Barao would have beaten Frankie Edgar. He would have shut down so many of the takedowns, I think. He was so big for 135. I mean, he might even have been bigger than Frankie. He hits harder, better striking overall, amazing kicks to the body and to the head, a great jab that would put Frankie at the end of his punches almost the whole fight. Good submission game and everything, man. Before USADA, Barao was a different beast. So I don't think Frankie would have like 7 title defenses, but he definitely would have reigned for a while. Because when did Renan Barao come into the picture? 2012. So let's say Frankie wins the belt in 2011. He has 3 fights before he fights Renan Barao? Yeah, he wouldn't reign that long, but he probably would have tied the record for most title defenses. Then with the Melon Man Crybaby. Hi Weasel, I've been a fan for a really long time and wanted to say thanks for all the amazing content. The way I enjoy and watch the fights is different thanks to you now. Thank you so much, man. That means a lot to me. That's ultimately what I try to do. I try to create a different perspective for fights. I give my opinions out there. It probably opens people's eyes a little bit differently on how these fights are actually going down. I've been wanting to ask for a really long time, how do you think a prime Rory Macdonald would have done against a current welterweight top 15? I've always thought he'd do well against guys like Shavkat, Bilal, and maybe Burns. but I've always been stuck on what to think about the others, particularly Usman and Masvidal. Also, I am only concerned for Shavkat's future after seeing him struggle to take down Jeff Neal. Once again, thank you so much for all the great content. I look forward for what the future holds. Thank you so much for the questions, man. Yeah, Rory Macdonald in his prime was a beast. I mean, for him to be winning against a prime Robbie Lawler before he got finished was very impressive because Robbie looked like he was the best fighter in the world. Because Robbie looked like one of the best fighters in the world. But let's say him in his prime, how does he do against the current top 15? He beats Michel Pereira, beats Jack Della Maddalena. We got to see more from him. Beats Michael Chiesa 100%, destroys Neil Magny, wrestles him too much. I see him beating Jorge for the fact that Rory was very tough. He had a good chin, but he would put Jorge on the back foot the whole fight with that jab and the front kicks to the body. And Jorge doesn't want to catch your kicks to take you to the ground either. So the front kick, especially from Rory, is one of his best weapons. And I think that would give Jorge a lot of problems, man. The jab to the face, the 1-2s, the left hook counters, the double leg takedown to mix it all up with. I think Jorge would be out of his element in that fight. I think he beats Vicente Luque, punches him to the face too much. Maybe gets hit a couple times from Vicente, but we're talking about prime Rory here. He'd be in that similar fight like Robbie Lawler, but Vicente right now is like a lesser version of prime Robbie. He beat Sean Brady. I think the striking is just too much and he shuts down the takedowns. Jeff Neal's a good fight because that boxing is something not to trifle with, and Jeff Neal has good takedown defense. And we saw prime Robbie able to line up that left hand on Rory's face so much in that fight. I think Jeff Neal can do it too. So I actually picked Jeff Neal. Wonderboy beats him. He pretty much did already, even though some people argue that wasn't the same Rory, but he was like one fight removed from that Robbie fight. Shavkat beats him. I think he's too big. I think he would be able to take Rory to the ground, counter him with some good shots, and land some good kicks too. And if Rory throws that front kick, he will get taken to the ground. I think he beats Burns. He will stop the takedowns, punch him to the face too much, and move away from those overhands. Right, Gilbert Burns, he will throw a jab sometimes, but he would wing that overhand immediately afterward. And I think he'd run into a lot of jabs, man. Just get intercepted, head game blown back by those jabs trying to get in. He beats Bilal Muhammad. I think he's just better everywhere. I think Khamzat beats Rory for the fact that he is bigger. He will take him to the ground. He will catch the kicks. He will put on that firefight back and forth. Rory doesn't move his head too much, so he will be in line for Khamzat's long punches too. They both have a long reach, but Khamzat being, 2 to 3 inches taller is going to bring a different kind of issue too. And if he takes Rory to the ground, Rory's going to run into a lot of problems from the ground and pound to Khamzat constantly trying to get his back, and that kind of wrestling is something that Rory is not used to. He has that older wrestling style, and he's not familiar with his new Dagestani or Chechen wrestling style. I think Colby beats him, too good of a wrestler, shoots it under the punches, grinds out the fight, and just overwhelms him. I think Usman does the same thing, but with more power. That jab will crush Rory's face. Right cross against a guy who doesn't move his head either. That's dangerous if you're fighting Usman. And Leon beats Rory, just a better technical striker overall. Out-techniques him on the feet, stops a lot of the takedowns too. But it should be a good fight for the fact that Leon will back up and at least give Rory the fence to use in order to be successful with some takedowns. But if Leon gives up his back to Rory as he tries to stand up, Rory could submit him because he would take his back. Now, about Shavkat not getting the takedowns on Jeff Neal, it was surprising to see, but you also do have to remember that Jeff Neal was bigger going into the fight. 5 pounds overweight on the scale doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually is. You're a third of the way up the next weight class. You could think of an analogy like the difference between benching 170 and 175 pounds. Or walk around with a 5-pound dumbbell everywhere. You're going to feel a difference there because when you're trying to wrestle a guy weighed 5 pounds heavier than you on weigh-ins, you feel that extra 5-pound resistance. And not only that, they're going to have an easier time to recover after the weight cut. There's a reason why Jeff Neal looks so much bigger in the cage against Shavkat than he did against any other welterweight. He looked enormous in there. And then with the Scott Lindsay. So this actually ties in a little bit. Hey Weasel, how do you feel about Rakhmonov's fight IQ after seeing him decide to stand with Neal in their latest fight? So he decided to stand with Neal because I think he is confident in his striking. And he did very well. In fact, he was beating him for the most part. He rocked him bad with that right straight. He has some good head kicks, a nasty knee to the body, amazing jabs. Completely out-jabbed him, out-boxed him for the most part. So I don't see his fight IQ being bad for the fact that not only did he decide to strike with a good striker, but he beat him there. So if he would have been outstruck, then I question his fight IQ. But the fact that it turned out pretty well for him, I don't see an issue with it, especially with the fact that he also did try to wrestle. So it wasn't like he completely abandoned that part of his game. He couldn't get the fight to the ground for reasons mentioned before. So he actually used every tool in his toolbox. But some of it didn't work and some of it did. And the tools that worked were in the stand-up and getting the choke. Then we go to Khamzat. A lot of MMA fighters and fans constantly say things like, everyone is on steroids, which seems like, especially with how lacking the current and previous testing system is/was. If this is the case though, why do fans still discredit guys with failed tests? If everyone, or even the majority of guys are on them, would it not be a fair playing field? To me, it doesn't impact legacy at all, as I just assumed 90+% of their opponents were on PEDs too, especially guys from previous eras like Anderson. You're making a little too much sense there. I agree with you. If you believe that everybody's on steroids, number one, it shouldn't hurt their legacy in your eyes. If you don't want to contradict yourself, you do have to also believe that it doesn't negatively impact legacy because everybody's on it, right? Just some people get caught, some people don't. You only have to raise the legacy of guys you think are not using and never got caught too. But yeah, if someone thinks everybody's on steroids, you can't discredit anybody because they're just doing what everybody else is doing, right? They're making it a leveled playing field and it's going to be fair for everybody if everybody in fact is on steroids. I mean, we just learned some crazy stuff about IVs, and there are some fighters I am very skeptical about. And then with the Jon Jordan, even with his PED history, could you consider Jon Jones the outright GOAT? For instance, if he never pops again and keeps doing Jon Jones things at heavyweight. I never had him as the GOAT, I like GSP, but Jones is getting hard to deny. Thanks, brother. Thank you so much, John. I gotta be consistent, man. I said it before, and even as amazing as his achievements are getting, I cannot hold the GOAT as someone who popped for PEDs. Now, this kind of ties in with the last question that, if you believe everybody's on steroids, you could definitely see Jones as the GOAT. Or if you just don't care. Everybody has their own opinion on it, right? Everybody has their own perspective. I personally am going to stay consistent with the steroid stuff. If you popped ever, I can't view you as the GOAT. Even as crazy as it sounds, even if he gets 10 title defenses at heavyweight, I still can't consider him the greatest. Now, I can say he's the best fighter ever, the most capable, the best fighter on the planet in history probably, but I'd say being the greatest is different than being the best. Greatest is more of what you did in the sport, and if you pop for PEDs, from my eyes, it takes a lot away from it. And then we go to Conor Woll. If you were ever tasked with making the single most exciting fight card in UFC history, and you could pick across all eras, everyone in their prime, and regardless of weight class, what would be your 5-fight lineup? Thanks, Weasel. I always enjoy your content. Thank you so much for the question, man. This is interesting. I have to put Fedor Emelianenko versus Daniel Cormier in there. Those two guys have a very similar style, similar in stature, their body type is similar, good grapplers, wrestling versus judo, good jiu-jitsu from both sides, even though Fedor is a bit of an advantage there. Fedor has the power advantage, and they match each other in speed, but I would say Cormier has overall the technical striking advantage. Both guys have an amazing chin, good cardio for heavyweights. Fedor will bring a fight that's going to cause Daniel Cormier to respond, and that would be an insane one back and forth. I would also have to put Francis Ngannou versus Shane Carwin as the two most powerful punchers in history. Anything can happen here. You got to have a fight like that on the card. Both amazing chins, good takedown defense from both guys. Probably going to be a boxing match for the most part with 4 ounces, and someone's getting KO'd. I do like Francis in that fight, but again, you can never count out the kind of power Shane Carwin had. Even though he doesn't look like it, he's 6'4" with a 80-inch reach. He looks like he's 5'10" for some reason. I don't know if it's because his head is so big and his body's all compacted, but the guy's enormous. In fact, I think he weighed more than Francis Ngannou. I think he's actually bigger. This would be crazy. Anderson Silva versus Alex Pereira. Imagine that. The two best strikers in UFC history, deadly strikers in UFC history, going at it. Pereira's a big guy, might be able to defend off the takedowns, but we probably would have to say that Anderson will only attempt takedowns if they're there for the taking, but for the most part, it probably would be a striking match, and I think his pride would give in to him to strike with Alex Pereira for the most part. Anderson showboating in front of Pereira, who's just a menacing statue coming at him, throwing jabs to light kicks. Anderson trying to weave away from the punches and leaning back, pulling away from the left hook to counter him with the straight shots. Dancing around Pereira, throwing out jabs at him, and Pereira just lines up some big punch and drops him or something. Just an insane fight between two guys that have a completely different striking style. Anderson's more flashy, finesse, speed, and all of that, where Alex Pereira is a marauding, fundamentally sound powerhouse that does not let up on you. You gotta throw in prime Conor McGregor versus, I would say, a great one would be Rafael Fiziev. That fight would be insane. Fiziev just bringing the fight to him. Conor's gonna look for the counter shot the whole time. Fiziev throwing out a lot of kicks and crazy stuff. Conor spinning for his own kicks, trying to line up that left hand as Fiziev is angling off for his hooks. Two guys that have a good chin, explosively fast in the first round. And finally, everybody has their opinion on how it will go down, but I don't care, man. I gotta see it. Even in a hypothetical world, the main event would be Khabib versus Tony Ferguson. Both in their prime. Have to put that on in any hypothetical card. We're talking about the Tony Ferguson that fought RDA versus the Khabib that fought Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. I think Khabib would have won, but I cannot count on Tony Ferguson in that kind of fight. A guy who throws out submissions the way he does, attacks off of his back, better striking capabilities on the feet, very long with the jab, throwing out elbows and stuff in close range, harder guy to take to the ground when he was in his prime. Like if you thought Volkanovski was fighting Islam on the ground, Tony Ferguson would bring that to a different level against Khabib. Elbows off his back, constantly going for submissions, scrambling like crazy with that unorthodox Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skill. The activity from the bottom would be insane from Tony, but the ground and pound from Khabib is like the greatest in the whole sport. So that would be something hard for Tony to actually be successful with, but I wouldn't put it against him. And then what's a Reaper Omega? Hey Weasel, love the in-depth breakdowns you consistently put out. Thank you so much, man. We're finally at podcast number 100. So it's time for me to ask a question that contradicts your most famous quote and a fundamental part of fighting. What are 5 instances of looping punches, beating straight punches? Keep up the good work, and here's to another 100 episodes. Absolutely, man. So after I answer your question, I'm also going to say something I have been working on for a while now. 5 instances of looping punches beat straight punches. Now, in a fundamental level, it can absolutely happen, but you would have to slip the straight punch in order to land your looping, right? Or at least dodge it in some way. If 2 punches are meeting each other at the same time and one's looping, one's straight, both punches land on the target, the straight punch is going to beat the looping punch because it's going to be able to land first, shorter distance to travel from point A to point B on a straight line, whereas a looping has a longer time to land on the target. So that's why straight punches beat looping punches, and it comes on the inside, which can naturally block the looping punch from even getting through. Now, 5 instances of this happening. Gilbert Burns versus Damian Maia comes to mind, where he was able to pull back on the jab from Damian Maia and then counter him with the left hook. Dan Henderson knocking out Michael Bisping was a looping punch beating a straight punch. Bisping threw out a jab after mixing up his footwork there at the wrong time. Jab just like grazes across Dan Henderson's face, I think, or just slightly missed, and Henderson just wailed him with that overhand over the top. Or Junior Santos knocking down Cain Velasquez in their first fight, where he dropped him with the overhand right. As it looked like came through a jab, it's a little bit different of a jab. It arcs a little bit. It's very similar to a straight jab. But JDS was able to get his head on the inside of it naturally while throwing his overhand and then connecting him behind the ear with his overhand. Similar thing happened when Roy Nelson knocked out Brendan Schaub. So Roy was coming forward, pumping out the jab, and Brendan tried to intercept him with a jab while moving backwards, and Roy got on the inside of it while throwing his overhand and connected over the ear. That's actually the usual way you'll see overhands beat straight punches, is because you're able to get your head on the inside if you are same stances of your opponent. Or when Mark Hunt knocked down Czech Congo with the Czech left hook as he moved away from Czech's, or that's confusing. His name is Czech. Wow, that's crazy. As he moved away from Congo's right straight as he was switching stances forward because he overextended, it landed on Mark Hunt a little bit at the end of the punch, but he was pulling away from it and landed the left hook on the side. So like from these examples, the way the straight punch beats the looping punch is you have to make the straight punch miss, which in theory means that the straight punch is usually just a better punch. In order for the looping to land, you got to make the straight punch miss. Whereas for a straight punch to be a looping punch, you don't need the looping punch to miss before you throw it. You could throw them at the same time and the straight will win almost every single time if you land it on target. There are some outlier examples of the opposite, but like 90% of the time this is going to be true. Now, I am working on something. I don't want to say too much, but there is a show that I will be doing very soon. I'm really excited about it, and you guys are going to be able to get involved, right? It's going to be an interaction between me and the audience, and I'm going to have like people on and all this stuff. It's going to be a very different, and that's actually the time I will do the face reveal. So I'm trying to get the right people on it too, the best content possible for you guys and for myself. I want it to be enjoyable for all of us. And right now I'm kind of debating on where I want to put it. Do I keep it on YouTube? Do I put it on Patreon? Do I put it on another network? Do I put it on another platform? That's the kind of thing I'm really debating on right now. And then we go to Pablo Vasquez. What do you think is next for Usman? I don't really see from a legacy perspective what he would gain from taking more fights at 170 against younger opponents. And I also don't think he's a big enough star to be in money fights like against Conor. So should he try to make a run at 185? If so, who do you think would be a good matchup for him? Love the channel, man. You've really enhanced my understanding of this great sport, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for the question, man. Usman's in a tough position, man. So you can look at this from different perspectives. Now, if you're going to take his perspective, what he should do, a pro-Usman perspective, try to get the Nick Diaz fight, maybe try to get the Conor fight too. At least put your word out there that you want those fights. If that doesn't work, it's tough between him wanting to go up against another contender at 170 or him going up to 185 and going up against like Whitaker or something. Because 185 could prove to also be difficult because he is going to be smaller than those guys and he could get really hurt out there. And, you know, if he comes out there lethargic, not in the best shape or something like that, he can get knocked out easier because he is getting older. A lot of people are saying about that Leon fight that he didn't look the same. And if that continues further, if he looks even less of himself at 185, chasing a title in either division is probably not the move. He could try to get the winner of Belal Muhammad and Shavkat, try to call the winner of that fight out, or if he wants Belal right now and hopefully Belal turns down Shavkat, he could try to go that route so he can see if he has a future at 170 still. If he wins that fight, he probably will get another title shot. But the thing about 185 is, who does he fight if it's not Whitaker? You have to fight Whitaker. So the guy who wants a title shot at 185 right now has to fight Whitaker. That's how it goes. And I don't see Usman beating Whitaker, right? That's the toughest fight for him. So I think he should probably stick to 170 right now. Try one more contender, see how that goes. If he loses, the unfortunate reality is they're probably going to use his name to build younger stars. They're going to build Shavkat off of him. They're going to build Khamzat off of him. Someone like that. That's the reality of the situation. So if he doesn't win his next fight, he's probably going to be used as a stepping stone because his name is still going to be ripe. His name is still going to be out there that a lot of the casual fans even know about. And if they see like this younger assassin take him out like Shavkat, then you build on to the future. You know, you build on to the next generation. So there is that. And if he wants to get crazy at that point, try to go at 205 or something. I don't know. At that point, he doesn't have many options. And then we go to 1432 Guri. A couple years ago, when Izzy was having dominant performances, Jones was having close fights at 205. And then inactive there was belief in lots of people that Izzy could potentially beat Jones. Now after Jones' return and Izzy's last few fights, is it safe to say that would have been a big mismatch? Yeah, that would have been a horrible mismatch. Jon would have made easier work of Izzy than he did of Ciryl Gane. Because at least Ciryl Gane is enormous, and he at least has the strength to fend off Jones. Izzy wouldn't. Izzy got taken down easily by Jan Blachowicz, right? And Jan's offensive wrestling has never been that impressive. Jones is a different beast, and if he fought Izzy, man, would that have been a one-sided beatdown. It's kind of good now in retrospective that the fight didn't happen for Izzy's sake. And then with the bigness, if you could have a dream podcast between any famous MMA personality, alive or dead, who would it be? My dream podcast would be Stipe, Brennan Schaub, Nate Diaz, and Tito Ortiz. I love to see those four try to string a sentence together. By the way, love the content, bro. Thank you so much, man. You're definitely going to need subtitles. 4 different experts to translate there. Stipe speaks his own language. Schaub speaks his own language. So does Nate, and Tito needs more of like a cognitive translator or something. Pretty expensive podcast, I'm not gonna lie. If I were to have any MMA personality, I would love to have GSP on. GSP seems like a down-to-earth guy, willing to converse about a lot of different things, a lot of different topics, make it interesting too. And he seems very open-minded. I mean, when I heard him talking about like, he hired some guy to break down frames to understand his opponents, that told me enough. I mean, we're talking about back in the day where everybody was an elitist, right? Everybody believed that only fighters know about the sport. If you've never fought or trained martial arts, you don't understand it. GSP is like one of the first guys to be open-minded and other people outside of the field to understand the game. And it actually helped him, right? He actually understood BJ Penn because of this guy that broke frames down for him. Mind you, this guy was not like a fighter or anything that he had. He was just someone who watched the sport. And it still reminds me of that Cain Velasquez example of that guy in the audience asking why didn't he come early to fight Fabricio Verdum because of the high elevation. And Cain, and I think Megan O'Leary as well on stage, just told the fan, you don't know what you're talking about. This is a fighter. He understands it better than you. But then what happened? Gassed out in like the first, second round because he didn't come in early. So the fan knew. And honestly, most fans didn't even think about the elevation thing. But this guy did, right? Some random fan. Imagine that guy was in Cain's camp. It probably would have saved him a loss and not let him lose the belt. Potentially, that is. I mean, Verdum was a beast. I still favor Verdum to beat Cain. But yeah, so I love GSP because he is open-minded like that. He's not going to have like an elitist mindset. A lot of fighters have that. I'll love to have Wonderboy. Wonderboy's awesome, man. He's a very positive guy. And I think him and GSP would mesh very well together, too. They would understand things about striking that I can learn so much from, too. I think Uriah Faber would be cool. My cousin actually met him. He said he's like the coolest guy, really down to earth, very open and social to people, very good in like a public scene. And I think he would be great on a podcast like that too, especially with GSP and Wonderboy on. I think Brian Stan would be cool. So many stories outside of the sport, but in the sport as well. He knows so many guys, a lot of experience around the field, very positive guy, really intelligent. So those are the kind of guys I would have on a podcast, right? Really positive, good personalities, good mentality, very intelligent, and fun to listen to for the fans. I might even have Robert Whitaker. I forgot about him. Robert fits that kind of mold too. Then with the Brona occurred. After seeing Jones' amazing comeback, what do you think was the reason he was so lackluster in some of his previous fights prior to his layoff? Was he really just not motivated? What will motivate him going forward? Yeah, I'm starting to think this motivation thing's real. And honestly, looking back at the Thiago Santos fight, it makes me think even more than ever because he didn't even attempt a takedown. He attempted one takedown in a fight against a guy who was fighting on no knees. He had to have been messing around or something. There's no way because he shot immediately on Ciryl Gane. And Ciryl Gane's big, strong, athletic, fast, good footwork. Thiago Santos, smaller, weaker, with no knees, not as fast as Ciryl Gane either. And Jon Jones only shot once on that guy. Yeah, I'm probably thinking it's the motivation thing at this point. And I really wonder how many parties he's been to, because that's a big thing. I don't know if it strengthens him. I don't know if doing the dust actually strengthens him. It's like a sensu bean or whatever for him. Wait, sensu beans recover you, right? I don't know if it's like Popeye spinach to him, makes him stronger, ready for the fight or whatever. I have no idea. There's something he's doing that's not getting him motivated. And maybe the parties were distracting him, or they were or making him better. He said no parties this time, so I'm guessing the parties got in the way of his other fights. And they say he goes crazy, man. He parties hard. I know guys who can't even walk normally for a couple days after. Imagine trying to go to training camp and fight some of the best fighters in the world on a grand stage and being disciplined and all that stuff. This guy could take your head off with one shot at the highest level. And then go to Elder Diodoro. Hey Weasel, how far do you think Bo Nickal goes in the UFC? Does he have potential to beat the top contenders at 185? Thanks for the great content, keep it up, man. Thank you for the question. I think Bo Nickal has the potential to probably be a champion one day if the middleweight division does not evolve. If we don't get wrestlers here, I don't know who's going to really stop him besides guys like Whitaker and maybe Khamzat, guys who have a good understanding of wrestling. This middleweight division is lacking probably the most important martial art in all of MMA right now. So at the very least, right now, looking at the landscape, Bo Nickal will eventually be a top 5 fighter. And not only is his wrestling so good, his jiu-jitsu is amazing. His ability to get the back in his last fight against Jamie Pickett was insane. How fast he shoots, how fast he gets positions on you, and he's extremely athletic on the feet. You could definitely tell he's coming to his own when it comes to his striking. Now, he's not Adesanya or Pereira level because where the middleweights are lacking a lot in their wrestling, they also have the best strikers in the UFC. But all he needs is enough on the feet, enough fundamentals to mix up his wrestling seamlessly. If he can do that, he could beat a lot of these guys. And once he gets into the double-digit fights, right, he gets at least 10 fights in the UFC, it wouldn't be crazy to think that he would be able to beat maybe Alex Pereira, maybe Israel Adesanya, maybe Sean Strickland and some of these other guys. Because right now he's at 3? I think he's 3-0 right now. So if he gets another 7 fights, he would already have fought someone in the top 15, maybe someone in the top 10 as well. It wouldn't be crazy to think if he goes undefeated, 10-0, he could actually be fighting for a belt. As long as he's running through these guys as quickly as he is. It's almost like what Rafael Fiziev said when they asked him why is he fighting Justin Gaethje already when he was hoping to go up the rankings slowly. I'm just too good, man. Same thing with Bo Nickal. If he runs through these guys too quickly, there's going to be no choice but to put him up against the best fighters in the division because he's just that good. So, future, I can see him becoming a champion, but to be more fair, at least top 5. They went to Michael Galloway. After rewatching Izzy's last fight with Pereira, I noticed he saw a good amount of success when he took chances and remained in closer range. That being said, do you think Izzy's odds of beating Pereira are better if he takes more chances in his next fight, or should he keep the same mindset of trying to be perfect for 25 minutes? In my opinion, it's kind of a pick your poison situation, but I think Izzy's odds are slightly better if he trusts his skills more and goes in with the mindset of trying to hurt Pereira rather than trying to avoid being hurt himself. I agree with that. We've seen him go both ways multiple times. We've seen him go the being perfect mindset twice against Pereira. The first time they fought each other, and then the third time they fought each other. Both times did not work out for him. Then there was a fight that he took his chances to hurt Pereira. In the second fight, he had a lot of success early, but then eventually got knocked out viciously too. So I do think it's a pick your poison situation, and it might be better to try to finish off the fight before the poison can kill you. But if he wants to knock Pereira out and he's going into the fight with a mindset of I have nothing to lose, which is something he just said, try to knock Pereira out is probably the best path to go to. Because Pereira just has to hit you once and the fight changes completely. And over 25 minutes, that's really hard to be perfect that long. So try to take this guy out as fast as possible, knowing that you have a straight right that Pereira does not do well against. That is probably the best way to approach the fight for Adesanya. I don't think he wins either way because Izzy's tried every way possible at this point. He tried to wait back. He tried to counter. He tried to intercept. He tried to be aggressive. He tried to be technical. He tried wrestling. He tried jiu-jitsu. He tried the clinch. He tried long range. Nothing got him the win. Because if he waits back, he's going to get leg kicked. And we just saw what happened to him from the leg kicks from Pereira. And not only that, if Pereira has him up against the fence, he has the opportunity to intercept and cut him off with the left hook. And Pereira can even go for the double leg like he did against Adesanya in that third fight if Adesanya goes back too much. If he tries to be aggressive, he gets into a firefight with Pereira. They're both the same reach, so they can hit each other at the same kind of distance. It's just a tough matchup for Izzy, man. They went to Justin Lizamore. How do you become a commentator on the desk with Daniel and Joe? Have you ever had someone reach out to Joe or Cormier to ask? Your analysis is top. I can't say who, but yeah, I have. I have been reached out before to do an actual show. I didn't get into details or anything about it yet. No, I wasn't asked for being a commentator during an event like Cormier is or Joe, but I'm saying like some kind of show. I didn't really get into details of what kind of show it is. Then with the Yamabushi_Nate. What do you think about Jon keeping his mental composure when the commotion tried taking the tape off his toes right as he was about to walk in? Man, he must have been shaking at that moment. Like, what was going on? Is something just really going to stop my return right before I step into the cage? And he did break his toe before against Chill. Was it the same toe? I actually didn't check back to see. What if, like, they took the tape off completely and his toe just, like, fell off? Chill permanently injured Jon Jones, making him the GOAT. Stopped him from his return. Yeah, man, he didn't look like he was 100% confident or certain of what was happening and just hoping for the best of whatever these guys are trying to do. Then we go to Carlos Garcia. Given Alexa Grasso's massive improvement after every fight, do you have her finishing Carla Esparza in a rematch? If she fights like that, yeah. That wrestling, and Carla actually has good submission defense in general, so it would still be a tough fight, and Alexa Grasso at 115 might be a different fighter, but now she is older in her prime. She is a better fighter than ever. Carla just lost badly to Zhang Weili. I could see it happening, but it's a tough one to really call. Her submissions are definitely getting much better though, Alexa Grasso. They're with the Joa Cabo. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Azim by Volkanovski against Islam, and Ngannou against Gane, and Jones against Gane as well. Do you think that pure strength is becoming a very important aspect in fighting? Do you think that fighters should maybe lift more and do things that increase their strength? Keep up the good work, Weasel. Cheers from Portugal. Wow, shout out to Portugal, man. Thank you so much. Yeah, strength is a big one, but you have to really watch out of how much you lift. It comes to a point of diminishing returns. You don't want to ever harm your ability to throw punches the right way. You don't want to hurt your snap and your shots. You want to always keep that. And lifting too much at times, a lot of weight, low reps, and doing that as a long routine can actually make your punches and kicks weaker because you don't generate the kind of flexibility in your shoulders, the flexibility in your arms and your legs and stuff to be able to throw the proper punch with the perfect technique, and your snap goes away and now it becomes a forced punch, like a laboring punch, like you're pushing. If you know how to lift enough where your striking flexibility does not get hurt, yes, every fighter should be lifting more to get as strong as possible while trying to keep their weight around the same. Because strength when it comes to wrestling and grappling is major. It's not as important when it comes to striking, but when it comes to the grappling aspect, and especially now where you're seeing a lot of wrestlers coming to the top here, where grappling is becoming so much more important right now, and you're seeing a lot of good wrestlers starting to come up to the top again, these fighters definitely have to get stronger more than ever now. And there's a lot of good examples, just like you gave right there, as reasons why these strikers specifically need to start doing this. Get as strong as you can. In a lot of boxing communities and other striking communities, they get away from a lot of the lifting. I don't know how true it is anymore, but at least like several years ago, this is a big thing. I knew a lot of guys who used to strike. They never wanted to lift weights because they feared that would hurt their ability to strike as well as they do. And they don't want to build too much muscle. They want to be toned. So maybe that kind of mindset is still around, but strikers definitely have to get away from that now. Lift, get strong, and make it miserable for these wrestlers. And that's the end of the episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to give it a like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.